Hey folks, and welcome to Typology, the show in which we explore the mystery of the human personality through the lens of the Enneagram. My name is Anthony Skinner. I am the producer of this show, and we have got an episode for you today. We have a fantastic guest for you today, Mike Pacchione. He is a speaking coach, and he works with some very high-level speakers, many of whom you would be aware of. And today, Ian and Mike have a conversation about public speaking, communication, and how your number plays a part in your effectiveness or lack of effectiveness. So, whether you're speaking to thousands this weekend, or you're speaking to the Rotary Club, or you're leading a Sunday school, or you just want to be a better communicator in the workplace, this show is for you. Hey, don't forget to follow us on social media at Ian Morgan Cron. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Typology Podcast, TYPOLOGY Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as well. Hey, that's it for me, Anthony Skinner. And now, here is the host of our show, Ian Cron.
Mike Pacchione, welcome to Typology.
Ian Cron, thank you.
A man of few words. Hey man, tell people how you ended up in this niche career of being a speaking
Speaking coach.
Somebody needs somebody.
A speaking coach, which apparently I need.
I'm good at speech. Man, I always loved public speaking. Is meant to be the number one fear, which, by the way, I don't know how valid any of those studies are, because I find it unlikely that anybody stuck in a den of snakes is just like, well, at least I'm not giving a speech right now. You know what I mean? But it is a fear for sure. I just never really had that. I always loved I always at least enjoyed being in front of the room, sometimes out of annoyance. I had pretty boring teachers growing up, and I always felt like I could do better than they could, which is interesting to analyze, and we don't have to go down that road, but I am not that way in regular life, but for some reason speaking, I was always that way. I always thought that there was a way of teaching that could be funny, that could make concepts come alive instead of lecture style. In college, I had a teacher like that, and I was like, oh my gosh, I knew it. So I wanted to become a college professor. Went to grad school for it. Quickly realized that being a professor had a lot of it was stuff that I wasn't as into. Grading, going to meetings. The teaching part I loved. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I mean, I had a total God smiling on me moment where a guy came to one of my classes who was I forget what his position title was, but he basically recruited speakers to come to Nike. And he said, you know, you're a really engaging presenter. I need to bring in presenters. You seem like you'd be good at this. Would you want to speak at Nike sometimes? I'm like, okay. Seems like something I should do.
Right.
Put together a presentation for Nike, and that should be a presentation that you absolutely nail, but it wasn't for me. It was a B plus. After that, and there were reasons for that, but one of them was I'd never had a venue like that where it had spotlight on me and anybody from Nike can be there. Like Phil Knight's not going to come, but theoretically Phil Knight could have been there. And I started wondering, what can you do with speaking? I'd heard of the idea of motivational speakers, but that's like someone who lost a leg and found the will to live anyway. So that's not me. I've had a good life without a whole lot of trials in it. So I never thought I could do anything like that. Found out about this company called Duarte in the Bay Area. And it was the perfect fit. It was, for that stage of my life, it was total dream job, because it was merging the teaching that I always wanted to do. Now I didn't have to grade anymore. Now I didn't have to go to administrative meetings. I just got to fly all over the world, teaching people how to be better presenters. And that's better presenters in the story they tell, the slides they use, the way that they deliver speeches. It was perfect fit. Did that for 7 years. Took, I think, 900 flights. Is that? No, 700 flights, 900,000 miles. I taught close to 10,000 people, which is crazy. Crazy. 10,000 people laughed at my jokes.
You're on a roll. But now listen, let me ask you. Let me ask you this. You're an Enneagram 9.
Yeah.
Right. And we've had lots of conversations about the peacemaker. You're being the peacemaker. These people who have a deep need to avoid conflict. They're people who like to merge with the agenda, the preferences, viewpoints of other individuals or groups. Y'all like the status quo. You're also the most laid back, easygoing people. You have lots and lots of gifts as a 9. Then obviously, like all types, you have limitations. How has being a 9 served you in this role?
Yeah, I feel like the merging thing has been amazing for it, because I can get behind. Well, okay, so like let's take reading your book. When I first read your book, and there's that page towards the beginning that's the 9 different types. You can describe them in a couple sentences. I'm like, I'm this one, I'm this one, I'm this one. I thought I was all of them except for an 8, which I was like, there's not much 8 in me. But I think because I can merge with all those different types, it helps me to see their world and to be able to give them language that they need to use to see how to better make their point.
Right. Yeah. That's really great. That was my experience with you. And you did help me craft really what was the most important message, arguably, of my career. If that if it had gone poorly, it would not have helped me. I was speaking to a room of 10,000 people in an arena and another 130,000 plus live stream at the same time in different venues around the world. So it was a moment that I had to stick the landing, as they say. And without your help, I wouldn't have been able to do it. And you had to get inside the mind and the head of a 4, and to make it land. Now we're going to talk about the speaking or the communication styles of all 9 types. And maybe just to help speak into the anxiety that you mentioned earlier that everybody has about public speaking, and how each of those 9 types can leverage their gift and some of the things they may want to watch out for. Right? I think people are going to find that fascinating.
Yeah.
Yes, I think a lot of people are going to find this episode really meaningful.
Yeah.
Right? Because everybody's freaking out about speaking.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
And every type has a different freak out.
Absolutely.
All right, before we jump on that, though, I want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Because this is a podcast and I'm the host.
The very unique and special host.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. What makes a great talk, speech, presentation? Like what? Just in short, like give me a precise answer. What makes a great talk?
I had a stunning realization on this last year. I gave the greatest speech of my life last summer. I'm flying home. I'm on just such a high, and when you get into your 40s, there aren't that many things that can give you a high. Like, I'm not going to be a pro athlete. I'm not going to go into politics. Well, even if I went into politics, I don't know what gives me a high there. But you know what I mean? Like, there just aren't that many things. And a speech is one of them. If you nail a speech, oh, my gosh, that is the greatest feeling. I'm on the flight home. I'm like, gosh, what made that so special? And I realized the greatest gift that you can give to your audience is to be completely present with them. But here's the tricky part. You can only do that if you know your stuff, if you know how to calm yourself down, and you believe that people are rooting for you. Mm-hmm. Probably the people in the room, because very few people are in the room rooting for you to fail, but I mean, that's possible. But certainly friends, family are rooting for you. So if you know your stuff, you know how to calm yourself down, you believe that people are rooting for you, that's when you can be present with your audience. And that is the greatest gift that you can give to them. Now, the trouble is, I named those 3 things. Listening to that, I can picture someone listening to that, nodding along, like, yeah, okay, know your stuff, know how to calm yourself down, believe people are rooting for you. But each of those has like so many different components to it. The psychology of it, the work that goes into all of those. It is much easier for me to say that than to actually follow through on it.
Yeah. Well, you actually gave me some, this is just nuggets for everybody, right? Regardless of type, but you gave me a couple of really great insights when we were, and I had done a lot of public speaking before you and I worked together. So it's not like I came in out of the cold, right?
Right.
But a couple of things you told me. One was, when you walk on that stage, no matter what, you have to believe your message. And you actually have to have, and no matter what happens, if in the first 10 seconds nobody laughs at that first joke, if nobody's connecting, you cannot lose confidence in the talk you're giving. You got to stick to your guns and be confident in the message, regardless of the feedback you're getting from the room. That was one thing. The next thing you did is you said to me, okay, here's what I want you to do. When you're practicing your talk, and that was a revelation to me because I never really practiced talks, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you said to me, you have to rehearse this thing aloud over and over and over again. And this was the killer. You told me to rehearse it while music was playing in the background.
That's my favorite tip.
I love that. Why should we do that, Mike?
Because music, rehearsing is awkward.
Right.
I mean, you're speaking out loud in a room. This is something you never do otherwise. You're speaking out loud in a room and you're the only person in the room. Mm-hmm. When do you ever do that? And you're speaking and you don't know the stuff yet. Turning music on, I think, does a couple things. Number one, it takes some of the awkward silence out of the room. Number two, I think I probably suggested higher pace music or something that you would use for a running mix, right? So that gets your energy into it so that when you go out on stage, muscle memory, it's like you've programmed yourself to be energetic rather than what you would otherwise be.
What a great idea. I'm going to try that.
That's
great. I like that.
Great. Yeah. And you told me I should probably drink a half a bottle of vodka because I was going to be standing in front of 140,000 people and I needed to relax.
But you couldn't do that.
But I couldn't do that because it wouldn't have been a good outcome.
Right.
I love that you remember those things. Those are so true. I mean, I stand by that. One of the traps that I think people fall into when they're giving a presentation is they're waiting for the audience to lead them. So the audience will tell me if that joke was good. No. You need to know that joke was good. You need to deliver it. Steve Martin talks about that. If you read his memoir, I forget what it's called, A Born Standing Up. He's like, the secret to all of comedy is commitment. And that's true for comedy for sure, but that's true when you're speaking as well. If you walk out on there and you're, so I'm helping a friend with the speech right now. And the claim that he's making in the talk is that his company has your back. I'm like, Nathan, you have to deliver that so that the audience believes you. Because otherwise it's going to sound like, I think we might have your back. Mm-hmm. You can't wait for your audience to say, yeah, we believe you. You have to deliver it as if you know they believe you or know they will believe you.
Well, I believe in Mike Pacchione.
There you go.
Speech coach extraordinaire. Speech coach to the stars or want to be stars. And you have, I know many clients of yours whose names will go unmentioned. But if I were to mention their names, they would be well known to many of our.
You can mention them. It's fine. Yeah.
Hey man, so every type on the Enneagram. I want to go through types, and I want to talk about this whole thing about public speaking and type, leveraging their superpowers to succeed, in doing presentations, because everybody got to do them, right? And just talk about this idea that every type has a signature communication style, right? This is, you'll read this throughout Enneagram literature. And how can different types tap into the power of that communication style and also avoid the pitfalls of their communication style, right?
Yeah.
Because it can go both ways, right? It can definitely go both ways. Hey, everybody, I want to tell you about my friend Michael Cusick and Restoring the Soul. One of the lessons I've learned, Anthony,
tell me,
is that not everybody benefits from a traditional 50-minute hour or even from the typical weekly sessions. And this is why some people, even though they may have a great therapist, can go to couples therapy or personal counseling for months or even years. Some folks, they never really get anywhere if they're just going on a weekly basis. They don't make any progress.
That's right.
So this is why I'm such a fan and a believer in the intense counseling process at Restoring the Soul in Colorado. Restoring the Soul was created by my longtime friend, Michael Cusick, who helps couples and individuals experience deep change in half-day blocks over 1 or 2 weeks. Michael and his team know that sometimes you can't wait months or years, Anthony.
That's right.
To get to the bottom of an issue or experience breakthrough. So I want you to get a hold of Michael and his team if you really feel like you're in a rut and you can't wait months or years. You can call Restoring the Soul for a free consultation. That's 303-932-9777 and learn how their intensive counseling process can jumpstart your journey or launch you to a whole new place in life. Make sure to visit www.restoringthesoul.com/typology to download their PDF called, Anthony.
Hey, 5 ways unaddressed trauma may be derailing your relationships.
And now, back to our guest. So, with no further ado, let's talk about ones. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, ones are the perfectionists. People have a need to perfect themselves, others in the world need to be right and need to be good. Their speaking style, often people say it's sermonizing. What I would say is it's teaching. When they're in a healthy place, it's teaching. When it's in an unhealthy place, it can devolve into a kind of finger-wagging preaching. Do you know what I'm saying? A little finger-wagging preaching, So what, knowing that the some of the gifts of the one, namely their honesty, their principled character, their concern with ethics, with getting things right, they're detail-oriented. What are some of the pitfalls that one can fall into, do you think, in public speaking?
Yeah, gosh. Here's what. So I'm married to a 1. She is great at speaking. She doesn't fall into this trap much, but most ones, my experience, most ones, there's that part of a 1 that wants to go home and change their shirt because they're convinced everybody can see that like itty bitty mustard stain at the very bottom.
Right.
In a speech, no one can see the mustard stain. So, let me say that another way. Everybody wants to have this perfect script that they walk out to, and they feel like you're delivering. You left the line out. It's really easy to think like, oh, shoot, I screwed up the whole speech. I left that line out. Frankly, the audience, unless that was the most important line of the whole thing, it probably didn't matter all that much. But a 1 will totally beat themselves up over that.
So this is amazing. This is amazing you should say that, because I was recently, just yesterday, on Andy Stanley's podcast. And so I'm free to tell this story because Andy tells it on the actual podcast. He's a 1 on the Enneagram.
He is?
Yes, he is.
I had wondered about Andy Stanley. Sorry, keep going.
So Andy Stanley's a 1, and he said to me, I mentioned to him that about the inner critic that 1s have.
Yeah.
Right? And he looked at me with these big eyes as if I had been reading his mail, and he said, oh my gosh, I cannot tell you how many times I have woken up at 3 a.m. on Monday morning beating myself to death for one thing I said or didn't say in the sermon the day before.
Wow.
Oh, man. And he's the best there is.
Right. And that's what you had told me once, that you thought that Andy Stanley is the best public speaker that you've ever seen.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Right? And so for the 1, I guess what I'm hearing you saying is a pitfall can be over-focusing on, the making of a mistake and thinking to themselves, oh my gosh, that's the ruination of the whole presentation. And of course, that's a disaster if you tell yourself that in the middle of the presentation. Right?
Yeah.
So they got to dial that back.
Homework assignment. I mean, if you want to prove this to yourself once, or anybody really, but probably once, go and transcribe the entire Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I Have a Dream speech. Because it's not perfect. But he doesn't sit there and go, oh, shoot, I was supposed to say da-da-da-da.
Right.
Like, yeah, if he had flubbed I Have a Dream, sure, that would have been a big problem.
Right. So what then makes up for or compensates for, the missing little piece here and there in public addresses?
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, in other words, what covers the multitude of little sins in a public talk? Is it enthusiasm? Is it?
Oh,
you know what I'm saying? Like, what makes up for the dropped line or the idea that I wish I'd said this?
Totally. Yeah. So energy is a big one. Energy / enthusiasm. I think your willingness to be a real person in front of the audience is a huge one. Mm-hmm. One of the things I've found is sometimes I find myself, listen, I gave 3 different workshops for 7 years. Do you know how many times I said the word slide over 7 years?
Yeah.
And sometimes I would find myself, sometimes I would find myself presenting in front of people who paid a lot of money to bring me in. And I've done this so many times that I'm thinking of my grocery list that night. And sometimes I would realize, oh, shoot, I just rambled. So listen, this is what I love about speaking. It's not like a book where you put the book out there in the world and you have no idea when people were paying attention and when they weren't. You can see the audience. You can tell when people are paying attention, when you're losing people. So if you find yourself rambling or you felt like you left something out, you can just fix it in the moment.
Right.
One of the things I find myself saying is, so I feel like I rambled a little bit, but my point is blank.
Wow, that's good.
Now, it'd be better if I just didn't ramble, for sure. But the great thing is you can just fix that.
Right. On the spot, on the fly editing is what we call that, right? So,
yeah.
Okay. So for ones, I would also say this. I've been thinking about different presenters, different people who speak publicly a lot, right? I think Elizabeth Warren is probably a 1.
I agree.
You get this, and part of the reason is that, and Hillary Clinton as well. And what happens is they tend to get bogged down in the details.
Uh-huh.
They get down into the weeds of too many details. Like, this is why whenever I hear, what do Hillary Clinton and Elizabeth Warren talk about all the time? Policy. Mm-hmm. Policy in the weeds. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And they miss the big ideas and they get too far down into the details. And so I would tell one suggestion is, don't go unless you're giving a talk that requires a great deal of detail. But if you're trying to inspire an audience, don't go so far down into the weeds that you lose people in detail. Yep.
1s and 5s. The amount of detail that you think you need is you should probably cut that by 2/3.
Wow.
All right, let's talk about 2s. These are the givers, right? The helpers. Yeah. Their speaking style typically is called warmth. Right? Yeah. That makes all the sense in the world, right? Because they just radiate this sort of love and care and generosity and warmth. There's a lot of warmth coming off of it, too. I think when they're unhealthy and they're kind of moving in a bad direction, it devolves into flattery and being ingratiating. You know what I mean? Like sort of work in the room with love, but work in the room. What are some of the things that a 2, we know that the gifts of the 2 is communicating warmth and compassion and love and care. What are some of the pitfalls? What are the things that 2s should keep in mind when they're giving presentations or doing public speaking?
Yeah, so most speakers, what the audience wants is a mix of warmth and authority. Most speakers, most situations. 2s have the warmth in spades. And 2s give away authority rather quickly.
You mean in terms of giving other people the power to approve or disapprove of them? Is that what you mean?
What I mean is a lot of 2s would speak with a big smile on their face and they come across really warm and you don't know if they will get the job done. And they can sound wishy-washy. I'm not a 2, so I don't 100% know this, but if I could jump into the brain of the 2, I would have a pretty good guess that if they look out in an audience that's not smiling back at them, which, newsflash, that's what a lot of audiences look like. Mm-hmm. I have a feeling that would crush their self-esteem in the moment.
Oh man, that's a great insight right there. I do think that could be true in some instances, that a 2 that was not getting immediate feedback or receiving a signal of appreciation from the audience would start to get a little panicked.
Shut down a little bit, yeah.
Right? And then they might start, devolving or moving toward being more ingratiating, being more effusive, doubling down on strategies in front of the audience that may not work for them, right? May actually alienate them from the audience. So I love that. So
that's good.
Sort of claiming their ground and maintaining composure and direction, even when the audience isn't appreciative. Is that what I hear you saying?
Yeah, and frankly, sometimes the audience just doesn't look appreciative, but I find myself telling people this all the time. And 2s especially, what does an audience look like when they are learning something? it's not a big smile on your face.
Right. Right.
Well, what does it look like to learn something? Right. So I just think that twos very easily can fall into that trap of they're not smiling at me. Therefore, this whole thing's falling apart.
Yeah. And I would also say for twos, they have to be careful of being overly emotional.
Yeah.
And risking losing the audience by becoming sentimental.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Right. Getting sort of, just sort of pulling on the heartstrings a little too hard, So I do think there has to be a blend of authority, quality content, information, and heart. But you can't go so far into the heart that, you're going to leave out a lot of the room.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight. Yeah, so heart is good in a talk. Heart blended with data or blended with logic is better.
Yes. So critical thinking and heart have to be in the message for a successful two doing a talk.
Yeah.
Right? Awesome. All right, let's talk about threes for a second. And this may be just a second. I know that you have worked with a lot of threes, a lot of CEOs of companies who are threes. I know threes that I know threes who you've worked with who are very successful in the public speaking arena. In a lot of ways, I think threes are natural public speakers. They're charismatic. They're great. We know that their communication style is sales or promotion. They're inspiring. They're visionary. They walk into a room and they can read the audience and know who they kind of have to become in order to win that audience, right? To align themselves with the audience, right? They are just amazing. They're masterful at it. They really are far better than any other number at what I've just described. Now, so that's their superpower in some ways.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that a three needs to keep in mind when they're doing public speaking?
Yeah. I mean, I think it comes most naturally for a three out of all the numbers.
Yeah.
Three is probably the most natural. There's that great part in The Greatest Showman. One of my very favorite movies, by the way. P.T. Barnum is like the classic three, right? And there's that great part where he's introducing the Swedish singer. And he says something and he's like, I know this might sound like a bit of Barnum humbug. And I'm like, yes, that is the risk for a three. Is that you can turn into someone who's not believable or who feels too slick. You can do that pretty quickly. You can turn into, the Fire Festival is an extreme example of that, but you can turn into that quickly. So especially if you were an executive who is presenting to his or her company, you're probably not aware of some of the promises that you're making. And over a long period of time, people hear promise, promise, promise. And you know what? It's hard for me to believe that person anymore. So if I were advising a three who was regularly presenting to their team or their company, it's like I would almost recommend an assistant for that person just to keep track of like the promises they didn't realize they were saying, because that builds, like, weirdly, that builds distrust over time.
Yeah, right. Well, I also think that you have to engender trust from an audience pretty dang fast, right? And I think the danger sometimes for threes is, for example, is they can pretend to know more than they actually do.
Yeah.
They can message, hey, I am authority on this thing, when actually they're not. They're just really, really good at a presentation that messages,
right,
I'm an authority or I'm an expert on this. I can remember one time being in a 12-step meeting, and a guy who was a three had come into the room, and within about 2 weeks, he sounded like the authority.
Right.
Everyone was following this guy around like he'd been sober for like 30 years, right?
Yeah.
But he had picked up on all the messaging, and he just knew how to present himself in a way that was very charismatic, and he sounded like he was more of an authority than he actually was.
Yes, right.
On the topic.
Right.
And that's that's cutting corners.
Yeah.
That just made me think of something else that I see threes doing sometimes is take note of their pronoun use. Because a lot of times they should be talking about their company or their team or some collective that's not just themselves, and they will say I.
Interesting.
I have to hire, blah, blah, blah. Well, wait, are you in HR?
Right.
You're not the one doing the hiring.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Take note of their pronoun use. That's another thing to be careful for.
Okay, great. Now remember, everybody, as we do this, we're talking about mostly some of the pitfalls that each type potentially faces in public speaking. So don't feel like we're pounding on you here,
Right.
Because every type that we've discussed, when they're in a healthy, self-aware place, they're unbelievable.
Right.
One's, Gandhi did a pretty good job. There's a famous speech of Gandhi that everybody should listen to. I can't remember the name of it now, but you can go online. In fact, look up Gandhi's most famous speech, and there's a one, right? Delivering an amazing speech. And we could go through a list of people,
sure,
right?
Yeah.
That when they're in a good space, man, they're incredible communicators. But I think what we're really highlighting is here for folks who are listening is, okay, here's what you got to watch for.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed part 1 of our 2-part series with Mike Pacchione. Be sure and tune in next week when we continue to discuss communication and public speaking with regard to your number. Mike and Ian will go through the rest of the Enneagram numbers, and then Mike will close with some tips. So be sure and stick around for that. That's it for me, Anthony Skinner. We're grateful that you've joined us here on Typology today. We hope you have a fantastic week. See ya.